So today's active learning lunch is using video to promote your social enterprise with Mark Power. So Mark, I will hand over to you.
Thanks for taking an hour out of your day, and I hope it's going to be useful for you. I thought I'd start with just a bit of an introduction. My background is public health evaluation, and I came to filming about 11 years ago. So I was not a creative to begin with. I became a creative in a way because mostly out of frustration that people weren't reading my work. And when I was writing things about, social change and social justice challenges that I was reporting on. So I'm not sure if that's similar to a lot of people, but yeah, I came to this first from as a practitioner, as an implementer, and then started using film to kind of tell stories. So that's a bit about me. Just a bit about the plan for today. My kind of introduction to video is around telling stories. So when most of the time I've been dealing with people who are from the marketing area of organizations, or that's just where naturally storytelling ends up when you're in an organization. But my approach to this is coming from a perspective of telling complicated stories in a visual manner to help people understand things. So that's how I came into this, because I was telling complicated stories through reports and no one was reading them. So I was like, there must be a better way to tell this story. And luckily enough, there is. So if people are looking for like a 2-minute video on how to, the easiest way to do an organizational profile, that's like, there'll be elements of today that you'll get some information on, but by and large, what I'm going to talk a little about today is telling stories and a bit about engaging with your audience in terms of them understanding who you are, why they should care, why they should join, or why they should participate with your organization. So it's more around those fundamental story elements about your business, about your social enterprise, why they should connect basically with you. I hope that explains my perspective. So yeah, so my tagline today is it's a crash course on telling your story visually. So a bit about me and Aidworthy. I'm going to talk a bit about my journey to video. As I was saying before, I'm coming from a person who used to write a lot of reports in organizations that no one was reading. My first efforts to make film about 11 years ago, and what I learned, and so hopefully I'll put you in the, in terms of your journey along the way. And then everything I've learned to date, I'll be including some cheat sheets. Now I'll be upfront about it. There's 2 ways to make a video. 1, get some help, and 2, do it yourself. So we're going to spend most of the time in the do it yourself part of today. But let's just be aware that this is quite a, we're talking about this in terms of filmmaking, and it can be like this really when you think about how big a film can be and how big a video can be. So we're looking at a very small kind of section of video production, editing, all that sort of stuff. So if thumbs up, okay, cool. So my journey to video, and I think it's important from my point of view to just share my story, because in a way that's part of, I think, about what we're all doing with a visual story, is we're sharing our story. So hopefully I do okay at it. So my journey to video, I'm in Brisbane. I've just gotten married. My job finishes up. I've been working overseas in overseas aid work in the Pacific, and I say, okay, I need to find something different to do. I'm a bit sick of doing that, and I come to Melbourne, my hometown, and I get a job at the City of Melbourne, which, for those of you who don't know, is quite a big council. It's a major city council. It's got a lot of cash from all the ratepayers and the events people that, the licensed venues, and it's pretty cool. So I was quite lucky. I didn't know how to work in government for the first year. I basically, was floundering. I was like, this is not for me. I'd come from, getting my hands dirty. It was all this bureaucracy. So it wasn't really what I was looking for. But I landed in this late night cultural activation space, which was about Melbourne as a 24-hour city. And as a research person, my thing was, well, how am I going to get, policymakers to understand late night activation? This is about, doing cultural stuff at night, not about everyone staying up till 3 in the morning, getting drunk and fighting out the front of McDonald's. So if it was my job to kind of push that policy, what was I going to do to kind of tell that story? And I uncovered
I think this is the greatest idea that the city of Melbourne has ever had. Silent disco definitely should be going on every week. It is the best nightclub in town.
It's just good to have different forms of entertainment in the city, other than obviously nightclubs and pubs, which seems to be the choice form of entertainment. You get a lot of unsavoury side effects in the city from that, and it's just good to be able to have some stand-up comedy, theatre, live theatre, movie theatres, film festivals. We need a lot more of that sort of cultural stuff. Melbourne wants to put itself on the map in terms of being a cultural centre, so invest some more money into these sorts of events.
that was, and look, it's not the best video I've ever, obviously it's not the best video in the world. There's some sections there where the sound's not great, but it was, for me, it was a taste of what it could be like to visually show things that you often don't get to see. So, and as a result of that, we had this really interesting thing that happened where that particular program tended something quite bigger. We did some more research, and then we found that there was a real market for late night activation. And I'm not saying it was because of that video, but that project that we were working on and the amount of support it got led to the White Night festivals, which happened in Melbourne. So for me, when I was participating in this thing where I was trying to get something done where no one had a late night activation, what does that mean? It's a whole bunch of drunk people going out at night having a good time. Well, no, it was something quite different. It's about cultural activation at night. I think the only way for me, I was like, okay, I have to find a different way of telling this story. So, that it ended up with something quite cool, like the White Night festivals in Melbourne. And yeah, I'm not saying it was because of that video, but for me, it was my first taste of like, oh wow, video can be really quite powerful. So I was I put a bunch of people in the room, made them watch that for 2 minutes, and yeah, it got more funding. That was the pilot, and then so on and so on. So I'm just going to play this in the background while I'm talking. So the next thing I did was, and I've only got 3 examples, so this is my second one. The next thing I did was, okay, right, I'm in a policy setting. I need to do some stuff around this bottom end of Swanston Street and Elizabeth Street. And if you've ever been to Melbourne, all the trams sort of go down there, and then there's the train station. And there's often just, late at night, there was just heaps of issues, people getting drunk, there was bad lighting. So we did this thing where we got 5 of the big residents. We basically had like this focus group on the street. So we had the mayor there talking about the issues with that end of Swanston and Elizabeth Street. We talked a bit about, we had a bit of stuff around what's going on. He's talking here about the congestion at night, and how it's a meeting place. And if I just scrub ahead, you've got the coppers talking about what it's like for them. And then we put some visual overlays around what is the issue here. It's crime right at that bottom end of Swanston Street. And we talked about all the sort of stats that came up. We had some traders. Anyway, I won't go on, but what happened was, following that video, this is a 10-minute video. It took, we had some research commission that produced all these numbers, but it resulted in this new end of Elizabeth Street. So that project also resulted in quite a cool change. And from that point on, I was like, wow, video can really really make a difference in terms of decisions. People getting someone from because I used to write reports where people would go, okay, you need to clearly do something, you need to clearly make a change here, but they weren't acting. And I was like, this is really frustrating. They weren't reading, they weren't, engaging. And with something like this, where they've got a visual, everything in the one spot, you've got, you know, you've got everything there that they need to make that decision. They were making decisions. They were talking to the traders, like this McDonald's owner here. They were talking, and then they ended up doing this project where they redesigned the end of Elizabeth Street, the one over. You can see here we did some time-lapse footage of what it was like to, all the rubbish starts blowing out of the restaurants, everyone starts behaving badly. Anyway, I digress. But after this, I was hooked. I was like, right, I'm going to start doing video for real. This is going to totally change what I do. And yeah, and that's how Aidworthy was kind of started. When I think about visual storytelling, I think given that social enterprise is often dealing with complex, quite challenging issues, if you can do a really good story, and this is what the second part of my presentation will be about, you know, you can really make a difference in terms of how people understand what you're trying to do. The second part of this presentation is all about helping you, you know, achieve a visual story in your business and or social enterprise. So there'll be two parts to this. I'm not going to spend much part on the first part, which is all about commissioning someone to do it for you, because that's how I started and that's what I did when I first started. But I think that is certainly an option for some people to consider. Like, get a brief together. What they'll normally do is they'll normally storyboard what you'd like to convey, and that might be a bit about your founding story, about why you want to make change. Shoot it, edit it, and put it on your website. And you can expect to pay anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000 per video, including editing. Now, you know, something I do for a social enterprise, I do a heavy discount and make it cheaper, but certainly, you know, that's one option, and you can definitely be sure you get a good product. And as I've shown you, like, a really good story told well can really make a big difference. Second option, as I'm sure you're all interested to hear about, is how you do it yourself and what you would do, you know, if you're starting out small. Now, everyone is doing video now. So like, what I'm going to talk to you about in the next little while is not just doing video because everyone's doing it, but just doing what you can, but doing it well. So if you're going to do something very basic, there's nothing wrong with starting with a bunch of photographs of your organization with a narration over the top. You know, that done well is often better than, you know, trying to be too ambitious. So whatever you're doing, do it well. You know, don't extend yourself beyond what you feel comfortable with, because at the end of the day, you're representing your organization. And, you know, you can always, you know, try and get better, of course, but I think there are lots of things you can do in quite basic way, like webinars with project footage. Like if you're going to do like an event, do like a webinar, but include some of your project footage as you know, you cut to that, you cut to the to your project footage. And I'll just show you. Yeah, so this is Vimeo's events platform. They've just launched it. I use Vimeo for lots of different stuff. You're going to have to pay $1,000 a year for this, a bit more, but you can put on incredibly stunning virtual events where you can cut to your project footage, you can cut to speakers, you can put lower thirds on the bottom. And you know, it really will lift your experience of showing what your business can do, what your social enterprise can do. You know, like let's look under the hood in your social enterprise, get a bunch of speakers, a bunch of beneficiaries, run some project footage, do a live poll. Yeah, so there's that as well.
Thank you. Mark, I've heard of people actually doing on Zoom a presentation as if they're presenting to someone, but actually recording it and putting all of their artwork and things like that. And I've just wondered if you've heard of anyone doing that successfully, because it seems to me you would still have the image of people and it's not necessarily the most efficient way to do it.
Yeah, look, I think if you want to elevate your online event stuff, like everyone's doing online events now, but few are doing it to the level that you'd say, oh, that's a really enjoyable, you know, I can watch that from start to finish. It looks like I'm watching a TV show. When I showed you that before, that this sort of service, basically it's like a TV studio behind the scenes. And so all this functionality is what a traditional TV studio is using to kind of run the graphics, to cut to packages. So you'll end up with a much more beautiful looking event. But having said that, if you are going to do it on like you can some, like I know with like WebEx and with Teams and with Zoom, there are ways to kind of set your views up so that you're showing less of the people and more of you. And you can also edit it in post, like if you've got an editor, to take out that stuff as well. So regardless, you're probably going to have to do a bit of editing behind the scenes. I don't think you're going to be able to just do, unless you're happy with how it all looks. But don't call it like a cool event online if it's just basically a recorded Zoom call. Like, just call it what it is so people understand. They don't get their hopes up and then get something different. If you are going to do like a more traditional story about your organization, then yes, story arcs are the way to go. Like, think about your story. What is it about your organization that you need to understand? So every story has these 3 parts to it: the beginning, the middle, and the end. This is a narrative story arc, but you can apply this formula to everything you do. So you always need to set the scene. Why should someone be watching your video? Like, give them a reason in the first 10, 15 seconds, give them a hook about why they should care. And then with all stories, you usually have this thing in the top where you're overcoming a challenge. And for you, that's probably your solution is addressing some social ill. So that's your challenge, that's your climax. And then your business is addressing that challenge. And then you see the outcome. Okay, something's happened, something useful, some beneficiaries had a change. You record that, you visually show that, and then you have a call to action or a resolution. And often what you'll be doing is a call to action. So in all of that, you need to convince them, and this, if you're doing social stuff, like on a social media site, you'll need to do this in probably no more than 2 minutes. If you're doing an ad, like an ad for your business, you're going to have to do it in 30 seconds. So there's no easy way to do this, but you've basically got to instantly give them a reason to watch, instantly tell them something that's useful that you're doing to overcome the challenge and why they should continue to follow you or, you know, join you or somehow. So it's by no means an easy thing to do, but you know, if you get better and better as time goes on. If you're going to do more of a long form, you know, profile video, then you will have time to do things like invite your partners to talk about why they find your product useful. And in my experience, this really adds to the quality of your video. It really adds to the, you know, the authenticity, and you get a lot more, you know, resonance with you know, with your audience. Like, people can see what you're doing, they can understand through your partners that it's a worthwhile thing. If you can, show some data, show some things, how many customers you've had, how many, you know, your reach. All of this is building that complex story that I was saying earlier, like when I was showing those earlier films. You know, put everything that you think you need to get someone over the line, put it in there as, you know, as much as possible in the cleanest possible kind of way, and you should be on the right track. I mean, one of the things about video is that you can't put everything in. There's just no way you can do it. So one of the benefits of it is you have to physically decide what you're going to keep. And that process of constantly whittling it down to, okay, I'm happy that there's nothing else but these two points that are being made. 1, they should care about this. 2, this is what we do. And 3, this is how they should get involved. No more than 3 main points per video is probably a good thing to leave it with. Okay, so if you're going to keep going with your own story, then storyboard it. Like, get your scenes out on a piece of paper. How are you going to start it? What are you going to do there? What shots are you going to use? When you start doing the filming side of things, it gets technical really, really quick. So set yourself up to succeed by planning out as much as you possibly can. Like, how many shots were you going to need? How many locations are you going to have to go and visit? You know, how many people do you need to speak to? If you're going to do narrative, which I'm sure most people will, because they'll have some sort of talking, audio is king. I can't stress it enough. If you've got shit audio, no one will listen to your video. Like, doesn't matter how beautiful it is, if there's scratchy, blown out audio. And one of the things you probably noticed from my earlier videos is that audio wasn't so great. And that was one of my key learnings from the beginning, was audio is king. We had just used shotgun mics, which means it picks up all the background noise behind the person. And if you're doing that on location, that can be quite challenging. Yeah, think about where your video is going to end up. If it's going to be on your website, make sure you're tailoring the video for that audience. how are you going to hold them for 2 minutes, or how are you going to hold them for 30 seconds of social media? Unless you're working with professionals and you really want to tell a story, I don't recommend using scripts. Some people's, you know, in the marketing area, people say scripts because they want to control the story. But in my view, if you want this to be authentic, you just have to ask people questions. Why do you do this? Why is this happening? Tell us about this, tell us about that. In my view, scripts are really for professionals, and you know, a lot of the work I've done for people, they don't have enough money to pay actors. Okay, if you're shooting on a location, don't be afraid of the white wall. It's perfectly okay. You know, you don't have to do virtual backgrounds, and I've got one on today, and as you can see, you're probably looking at the outline of my head the whole time. It's not great. You can always do what this guy's doing. He's got his background out of focus mostly. I mean, it's not the most pretty background, but because there's enough light on his face and he's in the foreground and the rest is out of focus, that's okay. Like, don't worry about that too much. You know, a white wall will be fine too if you were closer to it. Shoot a shit ton of B-roll or cutaways. If you're, you know, you might do a shoot and you're like, okay, that's enough, I've got enough. But when you get into the editing, or if you've given this to someone to edit, then they'll say, where's this and where's that and where's, I can't cut to anything. So whatever you do, shoot heaps and heaps of B-roll. You can never have enough B-roll. If you're doing the shooting yourself, frame it so that you've got enough space around the person. Like this is quite a tight framing of that person's head. I'm going to tell you about thirds in a minute. But if you've only got one camera, make it a bit wider than that so that you can potentially cut in, punch in. Learn about the rules of three. So this is quite important. If you're ever doing an interview, you have to work out where to stick this person's head. And it's a bit complicated to explain over video, but essentially you need to have a diagonal kind of speaker, interviewer, camera sits here, and you talk across the camera. The camera looks at this person on the far left. You talk at them and they talk across the camera. You never, unless you're doing some kind of like, you must do this, go straight down the barrel, you would always go across the camera. So you need to learn the rule of thirds if you're ever going to do any interviews or sit down with people. A lot of people stuff this up, like it's a bit tricky to get right, but don't stuff it up because it'll look weird when you cut it up, because either they're looking out the wrong way or they're looking over the wrong shoulder, or yeah. So just spend some time learning about the rules of three or the thirds. Okay, interview in a quiet location. I don't know how many times I've done an interview and it's like, great, there's someone, you know, only if you've got the headphones on, you're listening through your audio recorder, there's a truck going around, there's someone doing construction next door. You can't hear it with your normal ears because you're just so attuned to tuning it out. But unless you've got good lapel mics that are pointing up, if you've got a shotgun mic, it'll pick up all that stuff behind you. And if you saw my earlier videos, you could tell that there was a lot of background noise. So if you can, get a lapel mic because they point up and there's no sound usually above your head. Yeah. Also sunlight. If you're doing stuff outside, try and be aware of the sunlight. Don't do stuff in direct sun. If it's a cloudy day, fine, but not those cloudy days where you've got sun and then this cloud comes over and then sun, cloud, because then you'll have the problems of exposure. Now, I'm not one to kind of say, go out and buy a camera, go out and do this, go and do that. I really don't think, given the technology the way it is, you can get by on so many kind of inexpensive products now. You know, you really don't have to worry about cameras very much at all. Cameras kind of parked at the moment. What you need to worry about is audio and light and framing and things like that. My advice to people who are getting started, go check out, you know, this feature on Vimeo called Create. You know, you can pretty much edit your own video, do everything in one hit. This wasn't around when I started. You know, there's templates, there's blah, blah, blah. So you can do all this stuff without really having to, you know, learn too much. So I'd recommend you start there. There's another one called No Film School. This is where I learn a heap about filmmaking. You know, it's basically got everything you ever wanted to know about filmmaking. There's courses, and there's also a free guide. You know, it gives you a free guide shooting on a digital SLR. Now, some people might be shooting on something else, but most people when they start out shoot on mirrorless or digital SLRs because that's just, it has a really good effect and it's not expensive. I also use Newsshooter because for the stuff I do, it's more kind of documentary heavy and it's much more kind of news stuff. So that's something that I like. Now, at the end of the day, no matter how good you are at learning all this stuff, probably at the end of the day, unless you're someone like our friend on the call here, you probably will need an editor at some stage. So either you try really hard because you can do all this good stuff, but at the end of the day, you've still got to edit the things. So there's no quick way to learn how to edit. That's where you start calling in for some help. But if you want to persevere, you can pretty much go back to that Vimeo solution and do stuff yourself. You can also use iMovie, which is perfectly fine. But if you want to do anything a little bit more professional, you probably need an editor. Now you can get editors, who work over the other side of the world, and you can pay them through like a freelancing type arrangement, but or you can do it yourself. My advice is don't invest in a camera unless you're really sure about everything else. Like, do that bit last. If you feel like you're comfortable with the audio, the lighting, the framing, you've got your editing sorted out, then yes, go and get a camera and then you're a filmmaker. But I would suggest do something like this, or get this tripod's too short, by the way. I'd get a longer tripod because you can only sit down on a table. And get a microphone, get a tripod, get a lapel mic, and you can either plug that into your phone or into a recorder, and then you pretty much, you're a one-man show, one-man runner, gunner, and you can just start doing it.
I have a question. So for us, we're wanting to do a bit of a suite of different video promos, and one of them is we're sort of up in the air about using Reels for Instagram to do quick short story promos, just to sort of try and drive traffic back to our YouTube RGQ TVs. Given that I think with the Reels, like the ones that seem to trend best are those 7-second to 15-second ones. What's your opinion generally on Reels? And do you think should we go for the whole story arc within those 15 seconds, or just do like a taster or something?
You can't do a story arc in 7 seconds. It's just not possible. So you really, all you're doing is you're just basically getting a grab, something that's exciting, that's movement, color, emotion, something that makes them want to click somewhere next. That's essentially an ad. Like, there's probably no other way to describe it. That's really an ad. A reel of that length is basically an advertisement. So you could try and I think the story arc really wouldn't be appropriate there. You'd have to shorten it down to try and get them engaged somehow and try and get them to click into something else. Just boom boom. That's it. You can't really afford to have much else going in that time period.
So if we were to aim for doing the 30-second video within that story arc, is there sort of a general number of storyboards that we should be aiming for within that, or is it just?
Well, I mean, you would normally be doing your 30-second as a teaser for your long one. I wouldn't suggest you doing a 30-second story. That's not really a story. I was thinking more like you do a 30-second kind of trailer almost, or a teaser of what you're getting in the 5-minute version, or whatever, the 10-minute version, or whatever. But you're basically just taking your best bits from your actual story. So you cut your actual story first, and then you do a teaser second, and then you run your teaser in your social media, and then you drive traffic to your website and play your long form on your website. Usually how you do it.
Yeah, great.
And there's nothing wrong with longer stuff once people are sort of ready to be with you and like happy to sit with you for a few minutes. It's when they're in the kind of the flick mode, in the kind of the crazy social media space, you have to be so quick. Once you've got them to you, then you can afford a bit more time. People do want to know a bit more about your organization. They are willing to spend a couple of minutes. You know, I wouldn't say 10, but they'd probably spend 2 to 3.
Yeah.
And if they're really excited, maybe more. But it really depends on your audience. So again, if you've got engaged customers that want to know more, then longer is fine. But if you're trying to drive traffic, shorter is usually better.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
I've got one, Mark. What, in really quickly, if you were to give 3 tips or like 3 like big mistakes that you see the average DIY doer, the average DIY filmer do, what would you say to kind of look out for or avoid?
One is audio. Just if you just buy a lapel microphone, or just test out what it's like different audio microphones. But if you've got a small budget, probably lapel mic's the way to go. 2, learn a bit about editing or find a good editor. Like, I mean, there's no easy way to make a film look good without a good editor, to be perfectly honest. Editing is pretty much 60% of the job most of the time. You can't get away with crap editing.
Yeah.
It's just, unfortunately, just a feature of filmmaking. You've got to leave the best stuff in and keep the crap out. And editors are really the only people that know how to do that really well. And thirdly, just don't be too ambitious. Like, you know, tell a simple story, tell it well. Don't try and often just keep the narrative tight. Like, tell 3 things, you know, 1, 2, 3, boom, done. Go call to action. Don't make it long. Don't make it, you know, don't go off in different directions. The thing about editing is it's a science to keep it short. So yeah, that would be my 3 things. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll reach out if you want to catch up.
What we actually have within the QSAC website, we have a lovely online learning centre, and digital storytellers have actually stepped it out. What to do, how to do it in terms of creating videos. So it's an online course that we've got